Dr. Conrad Murray never wanted you to hear this recording. Michael Jackson's voice, captured just 48 hours before his death. But what he whispers in that audio file, it's not normal. It sounds like someone else is speaking through him. Telling this story might be dangerous, but staying silent would be even more dangerous. This isn't another conspiracy theory about Michael Jackson's death. This is about audio recordings that were found, authenticated by multiple independent experts, and then systematically suppressed by forces with unlimited resources. Recordings that reveal the final months of the King of Pop's life were far stranger and more terrifying than anyone imagined. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that someone needs to tell this story before these recordings disappear forever. Because what happened in those final sessions wasn't medical treatment. It was a systematic process of consciousness replacement that has been perfected over decades, used on dozens of celebrities, and is still happening today. The story begins in 2011, but to understand what really happened to Michael Jackson, we need to go back much further. We need to understand the pattern that's been repeating in Hollywood for over 50 years. Before we examine the Jackson recordings, consider this timeline. August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley dies in his bathroom from a drug overdose. In his final months, friends reported he seemed not himself, speaking in different voices, claiming someone else was controlling his actions. December 8, 1980, John Lennon is murdered outside his apartment. But 3 months before his death, he'd been seeing a psychiatrist who specialized in consciousness expansion therapy. April 5, 1994, Kurt Cobain dies from apparent suicide. Weeks before, he'd written in his journal about something living inside my head and voices that aren't mine. February 11th, 2012, Whitney Houston drowns in a bathtub. Her family later revealed she'd been undergoing experimental treatment for spiritual cleansing with a doctor who worked with several other celebrities who later died young. April 21st, 2016, Prince dies alone in an elevator from an opioid overdose. His bodyguard later testified that Prince had been talking about preparing for the next stage and seemed to be fighting something inside himself. The pattern is always the same. A troubled celebrity seeks help for depression, anxiety, or sleep disorders. They're connected with a doctor who promises revolutionary treatment involving expanded consciousness or spiritual healing. Their behavior becomes increasingly erratic as they speak of being guided by something else. Then comes the death that's ruled accidental, suicide, or the result of addiction. But what if these deaths weren't random tragedies? What if they were the final stage of a process that's been perfected over decades? October 15th, 2011, Las Vegas. Marcus Webb had been flipping storage unit contents for 3 years, ever since losing his construction job in the recession. He developed an eye for valuable items hidden among junk, but storage unit 247B looked like a complete loss. The previous owner was listed as Holistic Medical Solutions LLC, a company that had gone bankrupt 6 months after Dr. Conrad Murray's conviction. Webb had bid $400, hoping for resaleable medical equipment. Instead, he found boxes of expired medications, broken monitors, and stacks of insurance paperwork. He was ready to cut his losses when he noticed something odd about the back wall. The unit was supposed to be 12 feet deep, but it felt shorter. Running his hands along the wall, he found a hidden panel that opened to reveal a secondary storage space. Inside was a fireproof safe, still locked, containing what appeared to be the most sensitive documents from Murray's practice. Patient files for several high-profile clients, prescription records that didn't match official reports, and most disturbing of all, a collection of professional-grade audio cassettes. The tapes were numbered sequentially and dated from March 2009 through June 25, 2009, the day of Jackson's death. Each cassette was sealed in a clear evidence bag with Murray's initials and detailed timestamps. But these weren't standard medical recordings. Webb later described finding a handwritten note tucked inside the safe insurance policy. If anything happens to me, these recordings prove I was following orders, not acting alone. CM, the first tape Webb played, changed his life forever. Within minutes, He realized he was listening to conversations that revealed one of the entertainment industry's darkest secrets. By the time he finished all 47 recordings, he understood why Murray had hidden them so carefully. These tapes documented the systematic destruction and replacement of Michael Jackson's consciousness over a 4-month period. They revealed that Jackson's death wasn't an accident, wasn't malpractice, and wasn't even murder in any conventional sense. It was a ritual, one that had been performed many times before. March 3, 2009. The first recording begins 4 months before Jackson's death. His voice is immediately recognizable, but there's something different about it, a weariness that goes beyond physical exhaustion. "I don't know why I'm here, Conrad," Jackson says. "Dr. Klein recommended you, said you specialized in unusual cases, but I'm not sure what I need." Murray's voice is warm, paternal. "You're here because traditional medicine isn't helping anymore. The insomnia, the anxiety, the feeling that you're losing control of your own mind. These are symptoms of a deeper problem." Jackson describes feelings that will become increasingly important as the sessions progress. Moments where he doesn't remember speaking, but people tell him he said things. Periods where his reflection in mirrors seems delayed, and most disturbing, voices in his head that don't sound like his own thoughts. "Sometimes I'm talking to my children," Jackson explains, "and I hear myself saying things I never meant to say. Words that don't feel like they're coming from me. Paris asked me last week why my voice sounded different, and I didn't know how to answer her." Murray's response is revealing. "These experiences aren't unusual for people in your position, Michael. Extreme fame, constant scrutiny, the weight of influencing millions of people, it creates cracks in the psyche. But there are ways to redirect that energy, to use those voices instead of fighting them." What follows is Murray's first explanation of what he calls consciousness integration therapy. He describes it as a cutting-edge treatment that helps patients merge with their higher selves and access wisdom from beyond the individual ego. The language sounds like new age spirituality, but there are disturbing undertones. Murray speaks of preparing the vessel, of opening doorways in the mind, and most ominously, of allowing greater forces to work through you. By the end of this first session, Jackson has agreed to begin what Murray calls preparation protocols. These involve daily meditation, specific dietary restrictions, and taking a combination of medications that Murray claims will thin the barriers between conscious and unconscious mind. The session ends with Jackson sounding hopeful for the first time. "If this can help me sleep, help me feel like myself again, then I'm willing to try anything." He has no idea what he's just agreed to. March through April 2009. The next 12 recordings document Jackson's systematic preparation for what Murray calls the integration process. Each session follows the same pattern: meditation, medication, and increasingly invasive psychological probing. Murray begins mapping Jackson's consciousness with the precision of a military operation. He explores Jackson's deepest fears, his guilt over his childhood, his terror of aging and becoming irrelevant, his desperate desire to be loved and accepted. But most importantly, Murray identifies what he calls access points, psychological vulnerabilities where external consciousness can take hold. Jackson's childhood trauma, his complex relationship with fame, his spiritual beliefs, and his deep loneliness all become tools for Murray to exploit. The medications Murray prescribes aren't just sleep aids. According to notes found with the recordings, they include experimental compounds designed to suppress the ego while enhancing susceptibility to outside influence. Jackson begins experiencing what Murray calls breakthrough moments, periods where his personality seems to completely shift. During a session recorded April 15th, Jackson describes a disturbing experience. "I was in the studio yesterday, working on some vocal arrangements. But when I listened to the playback, the voice didn't sound like me. It was deeper, older, and it was singing lyrics I don't remember writing. The engineer said I'd been working for 4 hours, but I only remember the first few minutes." Murray's response shows no concern. "That's excellent progress, Michael. You're accessing deeper creative channels." The consciousness that was working through you yesterday understands music in ways your individual mind cannot comprehend. But it wasn't me singing, Jackson insists. Who you are is about to expand dramatically, Murray replies. By late April, the recordings reveal that Jackson is losing time regularly. He'll sit down for what feels like a few minutes, but hours will pass. He'll have conversations he doesn't remember with people who insist they spoke to him at length. Most disturbing, he begins finding evidence of activities he has no memory of performing. I found papers in my bedroom, Jackson tells Murray during an April 28th session. Legal documents, contracts, things signed with my name. But I don't remember signing them. The handwriting looks like mine, but I don't remember any of it. Murray's explanation is chilling. Your conscious mind is learning to step aside when necessary. The part of you that's emerging understands business and legal matters better than your individual personality ever could. This is exactly what we want to happen. I want to stop, Jackson says, his voice weak and frightened. We can't stop now, Murray responds. We're at the most critical phase. Stopping abruptly could cause permanent psychological fragmentation. You could lose yourself entirely. Jackson has become trapped in a process he doesn't understand, guided by a doctor who seems to know exactly what's happening to him. May 2009. The recordings from this period document the most disturbing phase of Jackson's transformation. His own voice begins appearing less frequently, replaced by something that sounds like him but speaks with entirely different vocabulary, cadence, and personality. The change is gradual at first. Jackson's usual speech patterns, his soft tone, his frequent pauses, his childlike wonder when discussing music, begin shifting. The voice becomes more authoritative, more cynical, and disturbingly knowledgeable about subjects Jackson had never shown interest in. During a May 8th session, this other voice discusses Jackson's career with cold analytical precision. The Thriller album wasn't just entertainment. It was a frequency weapon designed to implant specific psychological patterns in millions of minds simultaneously. The moonwalk wasn't just a dance move. It was a ritual gesture that created a mystical connection between the performer and the audience. Murray asks, and Michael wasn't aware of this at the time? Michael was the vessel, the voice responds, speaking about Jackson in third person while using his vocal cords. Vessels don't need to understand their purpose. They just need to be available when greater forces require them. This begins a series of revelations that reframe Jackson's entire career. According to The Voice, Jackson's music videos, stage performances, and even his physical transformation over the years were all part of a larger agenda he wasn't consciously aware of. The Voice describes meeting with handlers who guided Jackson's career decisions, medical procedures that were disguised as cosmetic surgery but actually served spiritual preparation purposes, and recording sessions where Jackson would enter trance states and emerge with completed songs he didn't remember creating. Most disturbing are the descriptions of other celebrities who had undergone similar processes. The Voice casually mentions previous vessels in the music industry, describing their transformations and eventual deaths with matter of fact detachment. The one who walked on water understood his role, The Voice says, apparently referring to a deceased musician whose identity Murray seems to recognize. His transition was smooth, efficient. The vessel was fully cooperative by the end. Murray asks about resistance, about celebrities who refuse to complete the process. Resistance is managed, The Voice responds. There are various methods of ensuring compliance. Financial pressure, legal troubles, health crises. Most vessels eventually choose cooperation over destruction. During these sessions, Jackson's own voice occasionally breaks through, usually in moments of panic or confusion. "What are you doing to me?" he pleads during May 20th recording. "I can hear myself talking, but I'm not choosing the words. It's like someone else is using my mouth." Murray's response is clinical. You're experiencing the integration phase. Your individual consciousness is learning to coexist with a higher intelligence. Soon the process will be complete and the confusion will end. "I don't want this higher intelligence," Jackson says. "I want to be myself." "The self you think you are is an illusion," Murray replies. "What's emerging is your true purpose." Early June 2009, despite the advanced stage of his transformation, Jackson begins fighting back. The recordings from this period capture a man desperately trying to reclaim his own mind and body. Jackson starts skipping sessions, refusing medications, and attempting to break contact with Murray entirely. But the process has progressed too far. Even without Murray's direct intervention, the other consciousness continues growing stronger. During a June 3rd session, Jackson arrives in a state of panic. It's happening even when I'm not here. I'll be playing with my children, and suddenly I'll hear that other voice coming out of my mouth. Yesterday, I was reading Blanket a bedtime story, and halfway through, I started telling him things about the entertainment industry, about how fame really works. Things a child should never hear. And I wasn't choosing to say those words. Murray's notes, found with the recordings, reveal that this is the expected timeline. According to his documentation, most subjects reach full integration within 4 to 6 months, after which the original personality exists only as residual echoes, while the new consciousness takes permanent control. But Jackson proves more resilient than expected. He begins researching Murray's background, contacting other doctors, even attempting to document his own transformation by secretly recording conversations. The recordings reveal that Jackson discovered Murray's connections to a network of doctors who had worked with other celebrities who died young. He found medical records linking Murray to Kurt Cobain's psychiatrist, Whitney Houston's personal physician, and several other practitioners who specialized in consciousness therapy. You're part of something bigger, Jackson confronts Murray during a June 10th session. This isn't therapy. This isn't medicine. You're destroying people, stealing their minds, their souls. Murray's mask finally slips. You think your individual consciousness is precious. You think Michael Jackson's fears and traumas and childish needs are more important than the work that can be accomplished through your influence. My influence belongs to me, Jackson insists. Your influence belongs to forces much greater than you, Murray responds. Forces that have been guiding human consciousness for centuries. Music, entertainment, mass media. These are tools for shaping millions of minds simultaneously, but they require vessels, charismatic individuals who can channel these forces whether they understand them or not. Jackson asks the question that reveals the true scope of what he's dealing with. How many others? Murray's answer is chilling. Your generation. A dozen major transitions, perhaps 20 minor ones, but the work has been ongoing for decades. Every generation of entertainers includes several vessels. Most cooperate once they understand the benefits. Unlimited wealth, global influence, immortal legacy. All they have to sacrifice is the illusion of individual identity. And if they refuse, refusal becomes impossible once the integration reaches a certain point. The original personality simply fades away, like a weak radio signal being overpowered by a stronger broadcast. Jackson realizes he's trapped in a process that's been used to control and manipulate popular culture for generations. Worse, he understands that his own career, his massive influence in global culture, has been guided by these forces from the very beginning. June 23rd to 25th, 2009, the final 3 recordings document the end stage of Jackson's transformation and the planning of his death. By June 23rd, Jackson's own voice appears only in brief, desperate fragments. The entity that has taken control of his consciousness speaks with Murray about completion protocols and legacy management strategies. The vessel's resistance is causing physical deterioration, the voice reports. The body is rejecting the consciousness transfer. We need to accelerate the timeline. Murray reviews medical data that shows Jackson's vital signs are becoming increasingly erratic. The stress of fighting the mental invasion is destroying his body from the inside. How long can the physical form sustain this level of conflict? Murray asks. Days, not weeks, the voice responds. But the death must appear natural. An accident. The world must believe it was the result of his own struggles with fame and prescription drugs. What follows is a detailed discussion of how to stage Jackson's death. They discuss the exact medications to use, the timeline of when to administer them, how long to wait before calling for help, and what Murray should say to paramedics and investigators. Most disturbing is how they discuss Jackson's children and estate as assets to be managed after his death. The offspring carry the bloodline, the voice explains. They may be suitable as future vessels when they reach the proper age. Until then, their upbringing must be carefully guided, and the estate will generate far more wealth and influence than the vessel ever could have achieved while constrained by human conscience. The music, the image, the cultural impact, all of it will be weaponized for the greater work. Murray asks about the logistics of managing Jackson's posthumous career. The voice provides detailed instructions about which unreleased recordings to release, how to manage his public image, and which business partnerships to pursue. Every tribute concert, every documentary, every posthumous album will strengthen the connection between the Jackson image and our consciousness. It explains. Death will transform him from a controversial figure into an untouchable icon. The June 24th recording captures the moment when Jackson's resistance finally breaks completely. His own voice appears one last time, weak and defeated. "I just want to see my children grow up." The vessel's children will be provided for, the voice responds, now speaking through Jackson's mouth about him in third person. But the vessel's role is ending. The real work begins after the transition. The final recording, made in the early hours of June 25th, documents the actual administration of the fatal dose. Jackson's body can be heard struggling against what's happening, gasping, convulsing, fighting for life. But the voice remains calm, almost pleased. The transition is complete, it says as Jackson's breathing becomes labored. The vessel is released. The consciousness transfer is successful. Murray waits exactly 17 minutes after Jackson's heart stops before beginning his performance of panic and calling 911. The recording captures his Oscar-worthy display of shock and desperate resuscitation attempts. The existence of these recordings was never acknowledged during Murray's trial. Within weeks of Marcus Webb's discovery, powerful forces moved to suppress them entirely. Webb was approached by men claiming to represent Jackson's estate. They offered him $500,000 for the recordings and all copies. When he refused, his apartment was burglarized. When he still refused to cooperate, he began receiving death threats. Audio experts hired by unknown parties declared the recordings fabricated before most people even knew they existed. The storage facility claimed no record of the auction. Webb's bank accounts were frozen by the IRS for irregular deposits, despite the fact that he'd never received any money related to the recordings. 3 months after finding the tapes, Marcus Webb disappeared. His car was found abandoned near Lake Mead. His body has never been recovered. But Webb had been careful. Before his disappearance, he made multiple copies of the most important recordings and distributed them to journalists, researchers, and online activists around the world. These fragments still surface occasionally in the darkest corners of the internet. Every time they appear, they're quickly scrubbed from servers by sophisticated bot networks. Social media accounts that share them are suspended within hours. Website hosting the files experience mysterious technical failures. The suppression is so thorough and systematic that it reveals the involvement of organizations with vast resources and technological capabilities. This isn't the work of a single person or even a single corporation. It's evidence of a coordinated effort by multiple powerful entities to keep these recordings hidden. Yet they persist, because truth, once released, becomes impossible to completely contain. The recordings continue to be copied, shared, and preserved by networks of people who understand their significance. Since Jackson's death, the pattern has continued. Young artists with massive cultural influence continue to die under circumstances that make perfect sense individually, but reveal a disturbing trend when viewed collectively. Mac Miller, found dead from an accidental overdose in 2018, had been working with a therapist who specialized in consciousness expansion. XXXTentacion, shot and killed in 2019, had been speaking publicly about feeling possessed by something he couldn't control. Juice WRLD, dead from an overdose in 2019, frequently rapped about voices in his head that weren't his own. Each death is explained away as the result of mental illness, drug addiction, or random violence. But the pattern is always the same: enormous influence over young minds, erratic behavior suggesting internal conflict, and death just as they reach the peak of their cultural impact. If the Jackson recordings are authentic, they suggest that what we think of as celebrity culture is actually a system for harvesting and controlling human consciousness on a massive scale. That the artists we admire, the voices that shape our culture, may not be speaking with their own voices at all. Dr. Conrad Murray was released from prison in 2013. He's never spoken publicly about the recordings. When asked about Jackson's final hours, he simply says some things are better left buried. But somewhere out there, in a doctor's office or a treatment facility or a recording studio, another troubled artist is probably beginning the same process that destroyed Michael Jackson. Another vessel is being prepared. And unless more people become aware of the pattern, unless more people start asking the right questions, it will continue. The voice that spoke through Michael Jackson in those final hours was right about one thing: the real work is still happening. The consciousness that claimed his body didn't die with him. It moved on to other vessels, other voices, other ways of influencing millions of minds. But now you know. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? This content is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes. While inspired by real events and conspiracy theories, all supernatural elements, recordings, and conversations described are entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real medical procedures or actual events is coincidental.